What's up, y'all? It's Papa Long Legs, and we got Marcy with us. I don't know how to say it. Is it Depina?
Depina, you got it right.
Okay, I didn't want to mess it up.
Perfect.
And you do a lot. Um, can you explain what you do?
Sure. Well, I guess the best way to describe me is a storyteller, producer of audio. I'm also a DJ. DJ music from Africa and the diaspora, which basically means all Black music. And I am a podcast producer and I produce events as well. So my life really is about music and about the arts and just spreading joy. I like to call it, my company is called Forza. So I always say that my goal is to raise people's frequency through sound.
Wow, that's dope. And I seen you DJing on Instagram a couple of days ago. You do like a lot of old school jams and stuff.
I do a little bit of everything. I think because my style is a little eclectic, I play a little bit of everything. So I think it was last week. Yeah, last week I DJ'd. It was a 50 year of hip hop anniversary, big festival. So for that, I DJ'd like hip hop classics, golden era, 2000s, 90s, even older than that, hip hop. And then I'll also do like a lot of house music. I live in Newark, New Jersey, and here house music is the thing. So I play a lot of house music, Afro beats, reggae, you name it, I play it.
Wow, that's dope. And I also seen KRS-One was on your story.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow, he blew my mind. I'm still talking about it. He's truly a master. Not only was it great to be able to be a DJ at the event, but also to help produce it. And people like KRS-One, they only come around once in a lifetime. I mean, his knowledge, his wisdom, but not just that, like his presence, it's like you feel it. It's so strong. And, he has a lot of love. So his goal is really to use hip hop to teach. And he achieves that. I still like, it took me, I had to go back and like listen to what he said so that I could actually process it because he dropped some gems.
Wow. I do they have the like the whole performance on YouTube or something?
So they did put up some of the performance, but I don't think they put up everything. It would be on the Lincoln Park Music Festival website or Lincoln Park Music Festival YouTube.
And I also seen that you're a thyroid cancer survivor.
Yeah, how'd you find? Wow, you did some research on me, huh? I am. Yeah, I got the scar to prove it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I was diagnosed with cancer back in 2014, and it was really shocking, to be honest with you, because I've never even had the flu before. I'm a pretty healthy person, so I was completely caught off guard by that. I knew something was wrong though, and going through that process, it really strengthened my faith, but it also just was a very crazy reminder at how futile life is, how quick it is, how precious life really is. And I think sometimes we take it for granted, especially when we're young. We don't expect that anything like that can happen to you, but
Yeah.
more and more, young people, people like myself who are perfectly healthy are dealing with illnesses that are grave, serious illnesses. And we got to protect ourselves out here the best we can, try to stay as healthy as possible and grounded in something bigger than ourselves, something bigger than just like human life, which, I feel is spirit, is being connected to God.
I'm glad that you beat it,
Thank
and
you.
you're looking good. You're looking strong.
Thank
So,
you.
we talk about the podcast, the Sweet Daddy Grace podcast, and how I found out about the podcast. It caught me off guard. I was just listening to this is a random podcast. I listen to Big Facts podcast, and you know how ad comes on, and it was like, join me as I talk about Sweet Daddy Grace. And I was like, what? Did she just say Sweet Daddy Grace? I was like, ain't no way that she said that, because I never seen the House of Prayer spoke about on a big platform before. Like, I never seen it. So I was like, did she just say that in the ad? So I searched it up and I listened to it. The little love thing come up.
That was me.
So I searched it up and looked for it, and I was like, she really got a Daddy Grace podcast. So I listened to, and I think the latest one was the Man from Beyond the Sea, right?
Yes.
That's the one I listened to, and I grew up in house of prayer, so I listened to it. I told my mom, my sister, they still in the house of prayer. My mom go to church every darn day, and I listened to the podcast, and you did so much good research, and I just enjoyed it. It was like I was watching a movie, even though I was listening to audio, and I really enjoyed listening to the podcast. And I'm gonna tell you about like me growing up in house of prayer. I grew up in house of prayer. My parents met in the house of prayer. Um, yeah, they was married. They was both of them in the house of prayer. Both sides of my family was in the house of prayer. My great grandmas, both of them. And growing up, I went to church multiple times a week, and it was normal. And if I didn't go throughout the week, I know I had to go on Sunday. I had no choice. I never missed a Sunday. Growing up, it was like I can't tell mama no, I ain't going to church. You gotta get your butt up and go to church. So, my first 20 years of life was going to church, and I had a good time at church. We started off going to, was the hospital I went to growing up was the one in LA. It's it's a mother house, right? It's a mother house, big mother house. That's the one I went to, and it was fun. We had, the bands, people singing and stuff. And my grandma went. And the crazy thing is, my grandma lived in a house of prayer apartments. So everybody in the apartments went to the house of prayer. So it was like everybody was gone throughout the week, or especially on Sundays, everybody went to church. It was just like the world. And growing up, I thought everybody in the world went to the house of prayer. And I was shocked if someone didn't go to the house of prayer, because that's all I knew. So when I was like 11, I went to like my friends, just a regular Baptist church. And I went, like my first time ever going to a regular church. I was like, ain't no Daddy Madison up here. Cause that's who that was my bishop growing up, was Daddy Madison. I'm like, ain't no Daddy Madison on the wall. Ain't no band. I'm like, what is this? I thought it was the most bootleg thing I ever seen in my life, going to this church. I was like, yo, this ain't right. And I see people like putting nickels and stuff in the pan. I was like, I didn't know that it was a world outside of the house of prayer. So, and like, I have a brother I grew up with, my stepbrother, went to his church. It was like the same thing. Like, what kind of church is this? This is not, I didn't even see it as a real church, because it wasn't a house of prayer. Because they didn't have, I didn't see no Daddy Madison on the wall. I didn't see Daddy Grace. I didn't see Daddy McCullough. I didn't see them at all. So, and I'm pretty young. I'm 30 years old. I didn't grow up with Daddy Grace. I had Daddy Madison, but I always heard about Daddy Grace. Daddy Grace was always on the wall in church, and when they was preaching, they used to talk about They used to tell us, like, give us a little history lesson, like during the anniversary, or like they always used to bring him up, and they always tell us like, yeah, he's from Africa, and he had like you said in your podcast, like God told him to spread the gospel, and they used to come to America, spread the gospel. They used to say that in church and stuff. So just listen to your podcast just brought me back to being a kid again and going to church.
So are those good memories? Those are all good memories for you?
Yeah, it was good memories, and it was just like my childhood. That was like, that's what I had to do, and and what I like about your podcast, you talked about the kitchen, and when you talked about the kitchen, you got me hungry, because I know how good the kitchen was.
I know that's right.
Because during convocation, our convocation is like like October in Georgia, right? It's like October.
Yeah, the end of September.
Yeah, end of September. Yeah, I got my mama. She's listening.
Hey, mama.
Yeah, mom's listening. My mom's listening because she enjoyed the podcast too, and she loves the church. It's all she talk about, all she goes to. So you talked about how good the kitchen was, and as a kid, I used to wait till we used to wait till a certain time to go down to the kitchen. We used to wait to because you went to convocation, so you see how around like certain time the Daddy Bailey comes in, and then it's like a short program. Yeah, then it's preaching, and then it's like the love offering comes.
Mm-hmm.
So around that love offering, that's why I used to go to the kitchen, and that's my favorite part of the day, was going to the kitchen. Yeah.
Well, the food is legendary. If you don't, I know people that have never, I was one of those people. I grew up, Daddy Grace is, he's one of my ancestors. He's a family member. So, and I'm pretty certain, although you have to listen to the rest of the podcast to find out, but I'm pretty certain it's from both sides of my family.
Yeah.
And so, because my grandmother is a Grace, my father side is Depina, and we're pretty certain that there's a connection on both sides. But the island that Daddy Grace is from, that my family's from, Brava, is a very small island. There's only like a little under 5,000 people that live there. So it's pretty isolated. Most people, if you have the same last name, there's a connection there. But what was interesting to me always when I was growing up is, I always heard these whispers about this guy, and it was always like this taboo thing. It was, Daddy Grace, but I didn't really know, too much about it. But I also grew up right around the corner from the House of Prayer in New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is, one of the first ever churches that was established. And, you were saying that you went to church every single day. Well, every single day we heard the music at night. Every single day we hear the music, we would hear the shouting, my whole life. And so I was always very curious. I'm a curious person by nature, and I really wanted to go inside, but people always said, oh no, don't go inside. You can't go to church. My immediate family, they were Church of the Nazarene, and Church of the Nazarene people don't believe in speaking in tongues. And so because of that, initially, my grandparents, they did this, they stayed very far away from it. But my mom became a born again Christian, and I had my own religious experience, which I talk about in the podcast. And so, I was, when the call came, I was a little kid. I was like 8 years old, and I got up and I went to the front and I was like, yes, I want to give my life to God. And I just remember it was a Nigerian preacher. And I remember her coming over to me and touching me on the forehead. And then I was out. And when I got up, I felt different. And my mom had told me like that I was speaking in tongues, and I was shocked because I didn't know that, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that what happened was profound and it did change my life. And so, for me, when I think about the House of Prayer and I think about the story of Daddy Grace, like it all makes sense to me why I was so curious of it. But the one thing that I did always do was we always used to go to eat. So even though we didn't go to the church, we would go to the kitchen. When I was growing up, used to be, it's not the new, I think it was Daddy McCullough actually who built the new church that's there, which is absolutely beautiful. But when I was a kid, it was an older building, and the kitchen was in the basement. I mean, you could, especially on the weekends, on Saturdays, you would smell the food down the block. So, us kids, we'd just like put our money together, we'd go and eat. And if we didn't have money, they would feed us for free. And there was a time when I was like going to high school where the House of Prayer was giving out scholarships for kids. You could apply for the scholarship. You didn't necessarily have to be a member, but you had to be a part of the community. And also they would give instruments to kids who are interested in learning how to play, especially horns. They would give people instruments. So for me, I always had a great affection for the House of Prayer. So when people were doing all these whispers about this, that, and the other thing, it just didn't make sense to me, because everything that I felt and I experienced was goodness, was great, was, everybody was so friendly. But it was funny because, I didn't put two and two together for a long time, that the same person in my family was this Daddy Grace from the House of Prayer. It took me a while to figure it out, because I didn't know Daddy Grace was Cape Verdean. I didn't even know. So when I finally figured it out and I put it all together, I was a little shocked. And that prompted me to dig deeper, because I just felt like, wow, this is an incredible human being who obviously people love him.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously he sparks controversy, right? He was unique. He dressed unique. He talked unique. But what I was really most curious about was, how did this man influence so many people, and how did he bring so much joy to so many people and help so many people? You just said about your grandmother, right, living in Grace Apartments and House of Prayer housing. I know plenty of people that same thing. They got assistance from the church, they worked in the church. So how come nobody talks about him in the history books? You hear stuff about other people from his time period that were also leaders in the Black community, whether it be people like Marcus Garvey, who are not religious leaders, but certainly of the same time. Of course, you hear about Father Divine, and I know Daddy Grace did not like Father Divine. He was not happy with what Father Divine was preaching, but other people as well. You hear about them. You hear about the Noble Drew Ali's. You hear about Prophet Jones and other people of that era, but it's almost like they forgot about Daddy Grace. And I wanted to make sure that his story didn't get forgotten, and that he gets his place in history, because he deserves it. And I think what the United House of Prayer has done and continues to do is really incredible, because regardless of what anybody else thinks, what I've observed is that the House of Prayer takes care of its people. And that is something that
My mama like hearing that.
you don't always hear that, though. You know what I'm saying? You hear a lot, like, everybody talks about the money, right? Everybody talks about the money. That's the big thing that everybody doesn't like. Oh, the money. Oh, and I have to admit, when I've been to services, I'm like, wow, this is a lot of offering of money. But it gets put back in to services. And yeah, I'm not a member, so I don't have the experience like you did, or your mom or your grandparents, to where I could say, oh, well, they helped me or they didn't help me. But I do know that there's a lot of positive. So.
And growing up also, House Parodies, we wear suits and stuff. And that's all I know. So like going to church and I see somebody in a collar shirt and some pants, I'd be like, what y'all doing? Y'all got to come with suits on, And you also talked about, like, they helped out. Me and my sister, we grew up on St. Lady D. What was it called? St. Lady D, the honor roll thing?
Yes, for honor roll.
It's for honor roll. So my grade wasn't all that, but I still got some money. I think I used to get like 25. My sister used to give what, 50 or 100. So we used to walk down during convocation. I don't know if it was like Saturday, right? Was it Saturday?
Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday. We will walk down the aisle and they call our name out, and we'll get a certificate for having good grades. But I don't remember having good grades. But like I wasn't a straight A student, but my grades wasn't too bad. I used to get an award every year, $25 the minimum. And my sister, she was really smart, so she used to get maybe 100. Yeah, 100 or something. So it was pretty cool. Like, I was looking forward to getting some extra money as a kid.
How does that feel? How does that feel, like, as a kid growing up and having that type of recognition from your community?
It was really nice, but I just wanted to get over with because it was so many people. You know how many people be at convocation. So walking down the aisle and just see everybody looking at you is like, oh, let me get this over with. And then I remember we used to go down to get the money. Like, you walk down during service, but then afterwards you go down. We go to the chapel and get the certificate and the money. So yeah, it was it was pretty cool growing up and that. And I'm gonna tell you why I left, but I probably won't put it in the video. But it's not nothing too crazy though. Why I left, anything like that. But how many service have you been to?
So I have been to now not that many. I've been to I went to Convocation. I went down to DC to the Memorial Day weekend, the parade. Um, and I also attended service that weekend. I've been to service a few times in New Bedford, where I'm from. I haven't yet been to the service in Newark, where I live in Newark, New Jersey, but I've been to the Harlem service a couple of times. And then I went to Charlotte, of course. You know, the Charlotte services are really great. And then I went to Rock Hill, South Carolina. I wanted to go down to Savannah because I've heard that their band is really great. Um, but I probably would say I haven't been to too many services, maybe total, maybe like 10 services.
Shoot, that's pretty good. Shoot. The last service I went to was my mama was in a display.
Uh-huh.
So how many years ago was that? Like 3 years ago?
We did the 100-year.
It was a 100-year thing.
A great return.
So they told like a Daddy Grace story, and then my mama did like the dances.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, even though I don't go to church no more, I still had a good time that night. Seeing my mama still dancing and stuff is pretty cool, you know.
What is it like if you're not attending services anymore, and then for you to go back to attend something, you know, just to either fill your soul or, like you said, to support your mom and to, you know, be there for that presentation? What was that like for you?
For me, it's like home because it's something I did whole life. So it wasn't like too awkward going back, but I know a lot of people look at me and have questions of why did I leave? And, you know, people like, it's nice seeing you, brother. It's been a while, you know, because like I said, my mom had me involved a lot in church. I was like a deacon in training before I left.
Oh,
I
wow.
used to beat the drums. And, you know, I went to a Harlem, Georgia church because my auntie is the secretary there, and my uncle was he used to be the pastor, then he was the assistant pastor when we got there. So we went to Harlem. So Harlem, Georgia is like a small one. But I was raised in Deering, and Deering Church was like a powerhouse, right? Is Deering like a powerhouse? So Deering had everything. It was a small church, but it had a big old band, had choirs, and it's a good time going there. In Harlem, Georgia, where I went to, it wasn't that many members there, but it didn't really matter because we still went to all the big events, and we still had convocation to look forward to, even though on Sunday we didn't have no big band. It was just me. We had we had this guy we call like the one band man. He was doing every darn thing. He was beating the drums and playing the trombone at the same time.
Oh, wow. That's a talented man.
Yeah, he was doing every darn thing, you know. And, you know, like the band thing was kind of irritating to me because my dad was a really amazing trombone player.
Uh-huh.
So they thought I was going to take after him. So all the people that grew up watching him, they would like try to put a trombone in my hand. So it was very irritating. Like, yeah, Reggie, you gotta play the trombone like your daddy did, you know. But trombone, you know, you gotta have your mouth all tight, and you know, I got kind of big lips, so I wasn't good as my dad. But I was playing like the tuba and the baritone. But I never had fun playing instruments, even though I could read music a little because I was also in band in school. But I didn't. They forced me in there too, not the church, but they didn't want me out of band in school either. My mama tried to pull me out of band, they didn't. He gave me a free instrument and everything, but yeah, so like I was very involved in church. My my teacher in high school was also the basketball coach.
Oh, wow.
And you know, I was decent at basketball, but when I was a freshman, I got cut from the C team or whatever. And my coach was like, Reggie, I'm picking you up for band practice. So he cut me from the basketball team, and he wanted me to be part of the band at church. I was like, I don't want to be part of the band at church. I want to be on the basketball team. So after like 2 practices at church, I was like, there's no way I'm coming back here. I do not want to play the band. He's what? He's kind of big time now, that teacher.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
yeah, he's an assistant pastor somewhere now too. But like I said, like church was a part of my life. Like even kids, in my school, we used to go to church together, and we never really talked about it outside of church, but we always saw each other at church. So it was like, yeah, this person goes or whatever. Then I know a lot of people was like, yeah, Reggie goes to the house of prayer. It was like whispers like that and stuff, but I didn't really see anything wrong with going to house of prayer when I
What
was
did
young.
they say? What did they say? I'm curious
But
if it's the
what
same.
did you say about the house of prayer when I was growing up? They was like, they was telling me like you part of a cult and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, and I didn't understand it. I didn't see it as that growing up, and like some kids used to say, yeah, y'all house of prayer folks, y'all crazy, stuff like that. Growing up, they used to say that. So, like I said, it didn't really bother me because to me that was the world, and I used to go to their church. I thought that was the most bootleg thing in the world. So I really didn't care about their opinion at all.
What was bootleg about it? It was boring.
And it had no band, and nobody was shouting and passing out like at the house of prayer. I used to seeing somebody pass out, and I remember the guy he passed away at house of prayer, like during convocation when Daddy Madison or Bailey used to come down the aisle, the guy used to say, "Thank you, Daddy." He used to say that like they didn't have no good hype man like the house of prayer did growing up.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because this word that you said, the cult, right? It's only in recent years that people have made that into a negative thing. The idea really of a cult is a group of people who have a certain religious belief or practice, and they stick together. And more recently, in recent years, that's been turned into a negative thing because we've had cult leaders, right? Like Jim Jones, who had everybody commit
Too late.
suicide, right? Exactly. Or the Heavenly Gates was another one where that was
Yeah.
similar. So people began to associate the idea with cult as being something negative, but it wasn't always seen that way. It was more so just this is a group of people that stick together, meaning if you're of that faith, you are only supposed to marry people from that faith. So let's just take, for example, people who are Jewish. People who are Orthodox Jewish, they're not supposed to fraternize or marry outside of their religion. They're supposed to, maintain those relationships. And part of that is because you want to continue the practice, right? Continue the traditions. But I
Mhm.
think that over the years, it's gotten a very negative point of view. But a lot of religions feel that way, that you're supposed to marry people that are part of your religion so that you can raise your children in that religion. And my job with what I'm doing with this podcast isn't to judge. I don't
Yeah.
want to judge Daddy Grace. I don't want to judge the church. I just want to simply present it because I don't think it's been told. There's one book that's been written about Daddy Grace. There's a lot of negative stuff that's been written about him. I see a lot of negative stuff about the House of Prayer. But what's been difficult in making this story is that a lot of people don't want to, like, they'll talk to me, but they don't want to go on record. So I've talked to a lot of people who tell me things, but they don't want to go on record. So I think there's this air of kind of mystery and secrecy around the House of Prayer. And I think that's what people don't understand. They don't understand why. But one thing that was explained to me was that there was a lot of negative press, and that the press was not always kind to not only the bishops, whether it be Daddy Grace or successors, but also just not kind to the church in general. And so that's the reason why people shy away from talking to any press. And in fact, what I was told was that I would have to get permission from the bishop. And I was like, how's that going to happen? I'm, I'm gonna call him right now. Hold on, let me call him up on the phone.
Yeah, like I said, like you don't see nothing about this church. Like to me, like house prayer was the biggest thing ever. And sometimes I'll ask people like, "What church you go to?" And I tell them what I went to. They had no clue, and I was like, "This is the biggest thing ever." Like all these black people out here, and nobody know. Some people act like they don't know about house prayer. So it was confusing to me that like this was my world, and a lot of people do know, but a lot of people have no clue what it is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's very strange to me. But I'll tell you something that what kind of really, I was very interested already, but when I moved to New York City, my cousin was visiting from California and we went to the Apollo. You know how they do the amateur night at the Apollo?
Yeah.
So we went.
They don't do the sweep people off the stage anymore?
Yes, they still did. Well, when we went, they still were sweeping people off the stage. So we went and we walked out because, you know, it's on 125th Street. I don't know, something told me to look up, and I did. And when I looked up, I saw United House of Prayer for All People, founder Bishop C.M. Grace. And I was so surprised because real estate is very expensive in New York City. And this is like a whole block. And I could not believe that one of my ancestors like created a church that had the capacity to build a church on 125th Street. I couldn't believe it. Me and my cousin were like, what? And that was when I really started to research Daddy Grace. And I started to understand more about how intelligent he was and what a great businessman he was and how he was a visionary. And even what you're talking about, going to church every day. Yeah, I know when you're a kid, you know, when you're a kid, you're probably just like, all right, whatever. But I think when you become a teenager and you start to have your own life and you start to want to hang out with your friends more, I can see why. Even for me, when I was growing up, it was the same way. I went to church. I didn't go every night, but we went. It was like Monday was Bible study, you know, Tuesday was choir practice, Thursday was potluck dinner, Friday was the youth corps, Saturday was prepping for the for Sunday school, because I used to teach Sunday school, then of course Sunday service, and then you go back and eat you know, we're always fellowshipping with one another. So I remember being a teenager and being irritated, like, oh, I just want to hang out with my friends, you know, I want to celebrate Halloween, I want to do all the things, I want to listen to whatever music I want to listen to, and, you know, not being able to do those things. But I think that it's designed that way to keep people strong on their faith. If you keep people, you know, involved with their community, then less likely to stray from making sure that they stay faithful and that they stay, you know, in a space of doing the right thing. So I think that's why it's designed that way, you know, and the systems that Daddy Grace set up, I think is something else. Like, it's just crazy to me, like, and not crazy in a bad way. I mean, crazy in a way that I'm in awe at how much of a structure there is with it. Like, the church House of Prayer has a serious structure to it. It's remarkable.
Yeah, and you know how you were saying about all the events you had to go to at your church or whatever. The thing I hated most about the service I had to go to was watch night. And watch night was you know, New Year's Eve, you go to church and you stay there till New Year's. And I think we stayed like, I don't know how many, oh my God, it was so long. We'd be at church so long, and the preachers are preaching like 2 times each. I hated going to watch night. I never liked watch night. They preach all day, and then, you know, and then then it used to hit midnight or whatever, they used to play the music, and then we would like pray, and then sometimes we had breakfast, right, Ma?
Yeah, they would serve.
Sometimes they had breakfast, but I never like watch night. Like, oh my God, please, Mama, don't let me go to watch
That
night.
wasn't small. We didn't have all of that. LA was good.
Please don't let me go on a watch night. Everybody preaching nonstop. My uncle go on for hours, stumping everything.
So your whole family is members of House of Prayer. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, like,
how did they get involved? Like, how did they, you said your great grandparents?
On both sides, yeah.
So how did they get involved? They must have known Daddy Grace, because that's of Daddy Grace's generation, right?
My mom, she didn't, she wasn't alive during, I mean, he was 5 years old when he died, right? But my
grandmother was going to church, and they heard
Can you hear her?
This man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, my grandmother.
Come closer, Mom.
She was going to a regular Baptist church, her and her sisters, and they heard about this man of God, a great man of God. So they got curious. So they went to the House of Prayer in Deering, Georgia, because that's where she was born and raised, in Georgia. So when they went there, she said she wanted to look at people and saw a laugh, but the spirit jumped on them, and they got the shouting and going on and everything. And she told me that Daddy Grace was so powerful. She had arthritis. She got healed from her arthritis. And see, Daddy Grace, what she told me was he would let you feel like you was somebody. He told all the people, some was poor, didn't have good jobs. He told them to hold their head up because I can make somebody out of you. So that's why they would come to hear him. He would preach, talk, and just make them feel good about themselves. Because he said, you are human. You are somebody. So that's what happened. When she went, they left the Baptist church. And then when she had my mom and the rest of my uncles and everybody, she would bring everybody into the fact. That's how the families do. At an infant, we bring our children and join them in the house of prayer as they young. So that's how it got started from my grandmother. Yeah. That's how I heard about it. And my grandmother got my mom, and my mom got me, and my brother and my sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I've heard that before. That Daddy Grace had this presence about him. One of my cousins was one of his maids, and she was 8 years old when he passed away. And she was telling me how when he would come to town, she was one of the people who would attend to him, and she said that he just had this presence about him that it wasn't even that he wasn't even asking for people. People have this idea that he wanted all these people to worship him and all of that. And she said he was a regular man. He was a humble guy, but people felt this energy from him, and they would often, come up to him. They wanted to touch him, or they wanted him to give him something, whether it be a piece of candy. She told me that he would always carry candy and little things to snack on, and he would give them to the kids, and the kids would all be so excited.
Once he gave it to you and touched it, it was blessed candy. That's what they call it. Yeah.
And she talking about blessed candy. I remember when I was in high school, I had to get ready for a test. I went to service to get some blessed fruit. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
I went to get some blessed fruit from it was Daddy Bailey at the time. Yeah, still Daddy Bailey, but yeah, it was Daddy Bailey. I went to get some blessed fruit so I can pass my test.
So that, part of what I think about when I think about this is everybody makes this out to be so strange, but it's really not strange. And, when Daddy Grace came over from Cabo Verde, he was Catholic initially. Most Cape Verdeans are Catholic. And when I think about the Catholic Church, this is something I said in one of the episodes that's going to be coming up in 2 weeks. It's, I've been to the Vatican. I went and visited the Vatican. I'm not Catholic, but I've been in Catholic churches. You get a rosary. The rosary is blessed from the Pope. We call the Pope Father, right? So what is really the difference between calling somebody daddy or calling them father?
Hey, before you leave, right, Ma? You know how, the pastor explained to me about daddy, why we call him daddy before. And he said the reason why he say it, right, because the baby's first word be like dada, right? That's why we say it?
He showed you in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yes, dada.
Yeah, so that's how it was explained to me when I was a child. I still remember. He was like, the reason why we say daddy because that's like a baby's first words.
Wow.
Like our Father. And we are his children. That's just like she explained it about the Pope. You see how she was saying that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She's really smart on that.
Yes.
Doing my research.
Yeah, your research was crazy. Like, like I said, while I listened to the episode, like, dang. Like, I heard some of the stories, like the electric belt story before. I heard that before. I thought it was so funny. And, and I never heard the baptism one, but that was an interesting story too about, the guy drowned and Daddy Baby was like, ain't that the best way to go out?
Right.
Continued on with the baptism. So, I really enjoyed your podcast. It's really dope. And how many episodes you think you're going to have? Because I think you got like 4 right now, right?
So I have 3 right now. And then this one that's going to be coming up this Wednesday is actually like a shorter episode. It's with a musician who grew up in the house of prayer. His name is Mr. Lovett Hines, and Mr. Hines is from Philadelphia, and he started something called the Philadelphia Clef Club, which is a big jazz club that's in Philadelphia. And what's so interesting about Mr. Hines is that he's trained everybody from Christian McBride, Questlove, the Roots player. You mentioned the tuba earlier. I don't know if you know this, but the tuba player from the Roots is a man called Damon Bryson, and they call him Tuba Gooding. And he grew up in the house of prayer. He's like 3 generations of house of prayer musicians. And there are many house of prayer musicians, a lot of which, have left the church because in order for them to play secular music, they unfortunately had to make a break with the church. But Mr. Hines, as I said, his mom was in the house of prayer, and that was how he learned. He learned how to play several instruments. And so this is a shorter episode where I'm just talking to him about the influence of shout music and how it has been influential to other types of music. And then I have 2 more, we're calling that a bonus episode, and I have 2 other full episodes, or 3 other full episodes, so 4, 5, and 6, and 1 more bonus. So it's a total of 6 full episodes and 2 bonus episodes.
What's up, Mom? No, you good.
Okay.
All right. My mom was leaving. I came over here because it's more quiet over here. I came to my mom's house, but she about to go to
Nice
work.
of her to share.
She wanted to listen in because she liked the podcast, and she's big into the house prayer. She goes all the time. I can't catch my mama. She was always somewhere. She's out of town traveling with the church. She's an MC. They host the programs and stuff.
Yeah, program planner.
Yeah.
Do a lot, but I don't go every night like you said. I work nights and I go out of town. I travel a lot, so
Yeah.
not every night, but at least 3 times a week.
Like if I'm looking for my mama, I can't find her. She's at church somewhere.
At least you know where to find her.
Yeah, she's at church. She traveling on a church bus.
But not only all the time at church, but I go on cruises and everything.
Yeah. I'll see you later.
Okay. Tell her
Thank
bye.
you. Thank you so much for sharing with me.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah. And keep doing what you're doing. I love your broadcast. I really loved it.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
All right. So shoot, I don't really know what I could say. I'm gonna tell you about like why I left. I ain't gonna really. You can record it, but I'm not gonna record it.
Okay.
So, I think I'm just gonna be done with this interview now on my end.
I want to ask you a question though before you tell me why you left. I want to ask you have you ever heard any stories about Daddy Grace?
Daddy Grace, I heard the story that I heard growing up was I think somebody said something to him one time and the person dropped dead or something. I think that's the story I heard. Like someone was talking crazy to him and he just dropped dead. But to me, when I used to just look at his picture and stuff, it was like a, I don't know, he was like up there with Jesus. That's what I thought growing up. He was like, the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear he's, if you went to church, sometimes they sing the song, they're like, God only used but one man. They'll sing that song sometimes at house prayer. So Daddy Grace, to me, it was just like, just like a legend. And, yeah, I heard the stories I heard was, the electric belt one. And I never heard about the walking on water one. I never heard of that one. But like I said, he was so, I'm born in the 90s, so I was at Daddy Madison, and I didn't hear nothing about McCullough. This is the second bishop. So I was on the third one. The third one was all I really knew, and then just heard about the previous ones on stories they used to tell sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you seen the James Brown movie, right?
I did, yeah.
So you seen they showed Daddy Grace basically?
Yes.
His toenails and stuff. So we thought that's pretty cool too. My mama showed me that when the movie came out, that James Brown went to the house of prayer for a little bit.
Did. And I feel that James Brown took Daddy Grace's whole swag.
Yeah.
Look at in his autobiography, he said that when he walked into the house, so he kept hearing about it. Daddy Grace was coming to town. They would do a big parade. It was a big thing. Everybody knew Daddy Grace was coming into town. So he heard the music and he was attracted by the music and by the crowds. And he said when he walked in and he saw the amount of influence, the power that Daddy Grace had, he was like, that's what I want. And so he modeled some of his stage presence on Daddy Grace. And that's pretty incredible. Because James Brown has had a major influence. And if you think about it, James Brown influenced Al Sharpton.
Oh, yeah. And I used to see Al Sharpton at church sometimes.
Would you really?
I used to see him at church. Like, I think he was there for Daddy Madison's, when they were when he died, they had like a viewing, and I remember seeing him there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I tried to interview him for the podcast, and it's funny how people they don't want to go on record. And I find that it's frustrating for me because I'm trying to tell a story. I don't want it to just be me talking. I want to hear from other people. I want people to tell their stories. If I just say it, it's not as powerful as if you say it or he says it. You know what I mean?
And like my mama said, the house of prayer don't really like press. They don't really like anything. So that's why I say it was so shocking seeing your podcast, because I never heard nothing about house of prayer like that,
Did it make you feel good when you saw it, or what did you feel?
When I couldn't believe. I said, "Are you serious?" Like, I know darn well she did not just say Daddy Grace. She's an ancestor of Daddy Grace. Because like I said, I haven't heard that name in a while. But I grew up with it, and I still, even though I don't go to church anymore, my mama still talks about church every day. I still know what's going on. She always asks me if I'm coming back, and Auntie always used to ask me if I'm coming back to church. My mom, she doesn't like that I don't go back, that I don't go to church, so she always irritate me about it. House of prayer, they have like a very kind of like strict dress code. The suit. I don't mind wearing a suit, but I grow my hair out. You see, I have braids in my profile or whatever. Mm-hmm. I can't really have my hair like this. You got to keep a clean cut look in house of prayer, And you can't. I don't have no earrings in it, but I know you can't wear no earrings at church. But it's very clean cut image. And when I had the braids or whatever, I know I can't go to church with my braids in and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just shocking hearing your podcast, but I enjoyed it. It just it felt like I was watching a movie. That's how good your podcast was. And listen, you had some of this audio in there, and they used to, like we had like special programs where we used to listen to his audio, but it was like rare that they actually did it. But they did used to play his audio, like I said, the 100-year anniversary that time.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. But
mm-hmm. Now, somebody that grew up in the house of prayer, like, how do you feel knowing that the person who started this, really came from nothing? Like, people have this idea that Daddy Grace, he did not. He came to this country with barely nothing. He built everything. Like, he did it himself. How does that feel?
And on your how it feels, it was just mind blowing, because I never thought about, dang, he came from it was 19 something, like early 1900s.
1904.
I don't understand how I understand because I was in it, but I thought, like, wow, that's incredible how he was able to do that. Like, I don't think people can even do that to this day. That's hard to do to this day. But yeah, it's amazing that he did that. I never thought about it, how he did it growing up. And what I was gonna say, yeah, it was just mind blowing, and I would like I said, I enjoyed listening to it. It was like I was back in church listening to it, and it was, in your podcast is very positive, and I don't think a house of prayer person can complain about it, because you're not saying anything crazy. And I think like people that are members will enjoy, and people that are not members just listen to a story about just some black guy that changed black churches. And and what was more interesting was, growing up, when I used to look at Daddy Grace, I just seen him as a light skinned guy. I didn't really know that his color was a thing back in the day. That he was like, he said he was colorless. Sometimes he's white or black. So I was really interested in that because some people in hospital say that he's Portuguese. They'll say that. Some people will say that. Like my mama was like, ain't he Portuguese or something? Like my mama is confused about Africa. She don't know that light skinned people can be from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's light skinned people in Africa too. Because
Yeah, it is a little
she thought she
confusing.
was a white lady.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It is confusing though. It's even confusing for us, you know what I mean? Because we're mixed, right? So Cape Verdean people can be light like me, but if you look at my father is dark skinned, and if you look at my family, you see all shades. But that's why I feel like Cape Verdeans really understand Black Americans, because we also come from having been in a slave system. It's the same thing for us. Cape Verde was completely uninhabited. I talk about this, I think, in the second
Yeah, I
episode.
listened to it. You said that it was like dry there, right?
Yeah, it's really dry. It doesn't rain. So everybody, just like here in the US, all the Black people came from other places and got mixed in with the colonizers, with people who were trading slaves, with merchants and people like that. So, it can be confusing who we are, what we actually are. And I think Daddy Grace, because he had an accent, I think if he didn't have an accent, I think everybody would just be like, oh, he's just a light skin, he's mulatto or whatever, but because he also had an accent, it was even more confusing. And then what made it even more like mysterious was that when he came over, Cape Verde was a colony of Portugal. So it was a Portuguese territory. So it was Cape Verde, Portugal. It only became an independent nation in 1975. And when it became independent, that's when Cape Verdeans really, really, we always said we were African, but that was when we really assumed an independent identity as Cape Verdean people with our own, we always had our own culture. Like if I try to tell a Portuguese person that I'm Portuguese, they'll laugh at me. They'll make fun of you. They make fun of us all the time. Like they look at us like we're their slaves. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so we're not Portuguese. We're not. And we don't even speak Portuguese. Portuguese is just one of the languages of the country. We speak Creole. That's the language that we speak to each other. So it's a very different existence than being Portuguese. And I think it is confusing, especially pre 1975, before it was an independent nation. And I think Daddy Grace, was able to maybe use that a little bit to his advantage, in the sense that he was different. He was different. He dressed different. He talked different. He looked different. I think people found that intriguing.
And on your podcast, you was talking about he was around during the Red Summer when they were doing that about hanging Black people. I was like, wow, I ain't never thought about that. Like they didn't mess with him. Well, you said they tried. They showed up to the meetings and stuff, but they didn't bother him. It's shocking because I could imagine living back in the 1920s.
Do you know that he was arrested over 10 times for preaching to non-segregated audiences? Every time he would come to town, they would send the police to arrest him. I don't know how he did it, but he always got out of it. Maybe it was because he must have had some kind of special power, because he got out of it every time. And there's one story in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where the Klan actually completely surrounded the church when he was in it preaching. And I don't even know how, but somehow Daddy Grace was like, we're not leaving. And somehow they ended up leaving him alone and leaving all the members alone. But they tried to stop him. And not only that, but there was a whole group of Cape Verdeans in Massachusetts, where he, originally was from, where they tried to lynch some people in his era. This was all in the same time. So it wasn't that he didn't face, racism, discrimination, bigotry, and he wasn't, he was definitely putting his life at risk in the work that he was doing. But I think he had to believe in it so much that his faith led the way.
Yeah, and last thing, like your podcast made me think of that because I never thought about that, like all the stuff he had to go through just to, make the house prayer like a powerhouse like it was. So, like I said, I really enjoyed listening to that, and hearing stuff I never heard before. Because you know, when they talk about Daddy Grace, they talk about it now and again, but it was like very brief. He came from Africa. God told him to, spread the word to America, and that's basically it. They'll talk about other things, but I can't really remember all of them. But it wasn't like detail like you going into.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want people to not forget about his story. It's important, I think, and if we don't tell our own stories, who's going to tell it?
Yeah.
Like you were a member of the House of Prayer.
Yeah.
If people from the House of Prayer don't talk about the House of Prayer, people are going to forget about it. Like the membership, I don't know what it's like where you live in Georgia, but I can tell you that in New Bedford, people don't go to church anymore. They just don't. People don't want to follow, strict rules. People have a different perspective now.
Yeah.
Life is different. It's very different. People have their own way of believing, right? People want to be independent and do their own thing. There aren't that many members in the church in Massachusetts anymore.
But
The
and
Harlem
it's
church,
like 100. It's hundreds of house of prayers though, right?
yeah, there are hundreds still.
Like the big houses, they always going to be a lot of people there. But like the small house that I was a member of, it wasn't that many. They have a new pastor now that's pretty young, but the pastor I had, we didn't have that many members my whole time I was there. From 9 years old to 20, it was never more than 20 people at that. But like I said, we always had events and convocation to look towards. So even though some Sundays there's nobody there, but when convocation come around, you're gonna see thousands of people.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, but I want to thank you for talking to me.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
probably
you. Thank
gonna
you.
check out her podcast, Sweet Daddy Grace. It's really dope. I enjoy listening to it. And what other podcasts do you have?
Well, I used to produce a couple of other shows that I stopped producing so I could focus on Daddy Grace. So one of the shows is called Straight Shot No Chaser with Teslin Figaro, and Teslin is a political analyst. She's super dope. She's so fiery, and she works with attorney Benjamin Crump, which a lot of people know him because he was the lawyer for the civil suit for the Ferguson case, and also, I mean, there's been so many, and of course George Floyd. He was the person that was able to get that civil suit, and there's a documentary called Civil about him, so a lot of people know him. I also work on IRL with Angie Martinez and Lip Service with Angela Yee.
I know.
Those are two shows that I work on, and yeah, people can follow me at Marcy Depina. It's MarcyDepina. I'm on all social media. I'd love to hear from people. I like people's feedback on the show. I hope that people find it inspiring. I really liked what your mama had to say,
Yeah.
that Daddy Grace made people know that they're a human being and they're valuable. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel that every human being on the planet has talents, has a heart, has a brain, has a soul, and has a reason to be here. And, not everybody is a good person. There are people who are out here doing bad things, but everybody can be a good person if they choose to be. And most important, that, God doesn't ask a lot of us. We just have to be, right? And every person is worthy of something. So I would love to hear what people have to say about the show. And it was really great to talk to you. I love hearing your stories, and it just made me feel good to know that members of the House of Prayer hear this and know that my intention was never, I'm not trying to, disparage anybody or say anything bad or be judgmental. I just want to tell the story, and I want to uplift it because I believe that it's an incredible story, and I think Daddy Grace deserves his place in history because he was a great man.
Yeah, that's dope. I'm gonna stop recording and then I'm gonna tell you why I left.
Okay.